There was a time in America when meat didn't come wrapped in plastic. There was no expiration date, no fridge, no freezer, just heat, flies, and a dead animal that will rot if you screw this up. Because back then, losing meat didn't mean wasting money. It meant hunger. It meant sickness. Sometimes, it meant death. And somehow, through brutal trial and error, Americans figured out how to keep meat edible for months, without electricity, without ice, without mercy. Today, we're going back to that world. 10 methods, 10 survival hacks, some brilliant, some disgusting, and a few that'll make you real glad you live in the age of refrigerators. This is how Americans stored meat before refrigeration. And stick around, because the last method is the most important one, and it explains why people survived winters that should have wiped them out. Method 1. Salting, turning meat into stone. Salt wasn't flavor. Salt was life insurance. If you were an American settler in the 1700s, salt was more valuable than gold in some places, because salt did one thing really well. It pulled moisture out of meat. And bacteria? Bacteria needs moisture. So Americans didn't sprinkle salt. They buried meat in it. Pork slabs stacked inside wooden barrels, each layer drowned in salt. No air, no mercy. The meat hardened, darkened, shrank. Was it appetizing? Absolutely not. But it lasted. Months, sometimes longer. That's why early American meals weren't about taste. They were about rehydration. Salt pork was boiled, stewed, beaten into submission. If you're wondering why old recipes look depressing, this is why. Method 2. Smoking, preservation disguised as flavor. Smoking meat wasn't about backyard vibes. It was science, without knowing the science. Americans built smokehouses, small wooden buildings where meat hung for days, sometimes weeks. Low fire, thick smoke. The smoke did 3 things. It dried the meat, it coated it in antimicrobial chemicals, and it kept insects away. Hickory, oak, applewood. Not for taste, for survival. Smoked meat didn't rot easily, didn't attract flies, didn't betray you in the middle of winter. That's why if a family had a smokehouse, they had a future. No smokehouse? You were gambling with starvation. Method 3. Jerky, meat that refused to die. Jerky didn't start at gas stations. It started on the plains. Native Americans taught settlers something simple. Slice meat thin, dry it hard, remove everything bacteria needs. No moisture, no fat, no softness. Jerky was tough, chewy, sometimes borderline inedible. But it weighed almost nothing, and it lasted forever by frontier standards. Cowboys carried it. Hunters lived on it. Explorers survived because of it. This wasn't food you enjoyed. It was food that kept you alive long enough to find better food. And here's where it gets weird, because the next method didn't dry meat out. It trapped it in fat. Method 4. Potting, meat sealed in grease. Cook the meat completely, shred it, pack it tight into jars, then pour hot animal fat over the top. When the fat cooled, it hardened. No air, no oxygen, no bacteria growth. This was early airtight storage. Primitive, messy, effective. Potted meat sat on shelves for months. To eat it, you scraped the fat aside, heated the meat, and hoped for the best. And most of the time, it worked. Method 5. Pickling, acid versus everything. If salt didn't work, Americans reached for acid. Vinegar, brine, spices, pork feet, fish, scraps. Nobody wanted fresh. Pickling created an environment bacteria hated. If it burned your nose, that meant it was doing its job. Pickled meat wasn't luxury food. It was backup food, the kind you ate when winter dragged on too long. Method 6. Winter air drying, nature's freezer. Up north, winter was the refrigerator. Americans hung meat outside in freezing air. Cold slowed bacteria. Dry wind dehydrated it naturally. But this was dangerous. Too warm, rot. Too wet, mold. Too slow, disaster. This method separated people who knew what they were doing from people who didn't survive the season. Method 7. Corning. Meat for armies. Corned beef has nothing to do with corn. Corn meant salt grains, meat soaked in brine for weeks, not dried but preserved internally. This method fed cities, fed ships, fed soldiers. It was predictable, reliable, boring, but safe. And safe food wins wars. Method 8. Sausage controlled risk. Sausage making was dangerous. Grinding meat increases spoilage risk. So Americans fought back with salt, spices, smoke, timing. Everything had to be exact. One mistake, and the food turned deadly. That's why sausage making was treated like a ritual. No shortcuts, no guessing. Because the penalty wasn't bad taste. It was sickness. Method 9. Root cellars, underground survival. Root cellars weren't just for potatoes. Salted, smoked, and cured meats were stored underground. Cool, dark, stable, no sunlight, no heat spikes. Primitive climate control. It wasn't perfect, but it bought time, and time was everything. Method 10. Timing death, the hardest truth. Here's the truth nobody romanticizes. Americans didn't just preserve meat, they scheduled death. Animals were slaughtered in late fall and early winter. Cold weather slowed spoilage. Preservation began immediately. This wasn't cruelty, it was math. Bad timing meant wasted meat. Wasted meat meant hunger. Hunger meant the end. Modern perspective. We think refrigeration solved everything. It didn't. It just erased the skill. These methods weren't traditions. They were survival systems, built through failure, sickness, and loss. So next time you open your fridge without thinking, remember this. People once kept meat edible with nothing but salt, smoke, timing, and discipline. If you want a deep dive on one method at a time, or how other countries survived without refrigeration, hit subscribe. Because modern comfort has a history, and it wasn't comfortable.